Now this may be a little regional, but the buffalo chicken sandwich was the sandwich that defined my childhood. This was a very specific buffalo chicken sandwich from a very specific place in Westchester, and everyone knew about it. But sadly, things change. And when I went to go try it in recent years, the sandwich I once loved so much has failed me. And I'll share that story later, but I gotta fix this problem. We now have to make that chicken sandwich here much, much better than it ever was. And what makes a buffalo chicken sandwich great are the best fucking chicken fingers you're ever gonna have. So we gotta get started making that. Now this is a completely optional step, but to really make the best chicken tenders, a little buttermilk soak goes a long way. So what I'm gonna do is just fill this guy up about halfway. Let's call it 2 cups, maybe a little more. Now to the buttermilk, I'm gonna add some spices. I'm gonna start with about, I don't know, 2 teaspoons of garlic powder, 2 teaspoons of onion powder, 2 teaspoons of paprika, 2 teaspoons of Italian seasoning, a few teaspoons of cayenne. And now I've shown you how to make your own buffalo sauce on this show many times, and I intended to do it again today. However, regular original Frank's Red Hot, which is my go-to hot sauce for buffalo sauce, and in my opinion, the only hot sauce for buffalo sauce, wasn't available at the store. And I didn't have time to go around finding it. But to be honest, if I was going to make this not on the show, I would go out and just buy their buffalo sauce. Mine tastes very similar to this, and I don't have to make it. And this show isn't always about making everything yourself from scratch. A lot of it is like when to not make something. Like, I'm not a baker, so I'm not gonna make the buns for this recipe. I'm gonna go buy it at the store. I mean, who's got time to make buns? So I'm gonna take some of the Frank's Red Hot buffalo sauce and maybe add 2 tablespoons to it. Then I'm gonna hit it with maybe 2 tablespoons of salt and some fresh cracked black pepper. Next up, we're gonna need some chicken tenders. Obviously, always get the best quality that you can. Now just place the chicken tenders into the buttermilk. I like to add them to the buttermilk as opposed to adding the buttermilk to a bowl of the chicken tenders, because this way I can dip the chicken tenders into the buttermilk, make sure they get completely coated, and none of them sort of bunch up and there are these spots that never make contact to buttermilk. Now we're gonna let this chill in the fridge for, I don't know, an hour or so. It's gonna take us some time to prepare the blue cheese and some of the other things. I do this a little bit in advance. You can let this go overnight if you want. It's really gonna go a long way making them a little extra tender and super juicy. Let that hang out in the fridge. Now we can make the blue cheese dressing a core, pivotal ingredient to a good buffalo chicken sandwich. Now for me, a buffalo dressing is essentially a ranch dressing with the addition of blue cheese. That's how I think of it. And it's gonna take these goodies to make it, most of which should already be in your pantry. The things you really should need to buy for a blue cheese dressing are blue cheese, sour cream, and buttermilk, which you already bought to soak the chicken tenders in. So it's all good. Now I'm gonna provide a recipe, but I never make this based on a recipe. I feel it out. And the way that I do that is I start with about 50-50 sour cream and mayo. Let's call it a half cup of each. So now I got the equal parts mayo, sour cream. I'm literally just going to use buttermilk to slightly thin it out into more of like a dip consistency. So maybe 2-3 tablespoons of the buttermilk, and then mix it around to see what kind of consistency you've got. See how it's sort of thick, creamy, but also pourable and sort of flowy? That's what you want. And you know, we're gonna add a little bit more liquid to this, and you can always add more buttermilk. So to that, I'm gonna add maybe 2 tablespoons of Worcestershire sauce. See how that addition made it even more flowy? And I'm gonna add a tablespoon of agave, half tablespoon of garlic powder, half tablespoon of onion powder, half tablespoon paprika, half tablespoon of mustard powder, half tablespoon of Italian seasoning. And I used to add a little vinegar, but the advantage of using something like citric acid, which I now hold, is that you can add acidity without adding liquid, so that it won't screw up the consistency of our sauce. So then another half teaspoon of the citric acid. Hit it with salt and fresh cracked black pepper. Now we can take our blue cheese and grate it in. Now I'm not a huge blue cheese fan, but when you grate it up like this as opposed to chunks, it's a nice subtle addition to it, and it helps make it a little bit thicker. Now that to me is a perfect blue cheese dressing. We're gonna let it chill in the refrigerator. It's gonna stiffen up a little bit. If you do find that it's a little too loose, you can go ahead and work in a little bit more sour cream or mayo, thicken it back up. It's gonna chill in the fridge. Now would be a good time to make your buffalo sauce, which would just be about a bottle of regular Frank's Red Hot into a pot, bring it up to a simmer. Once it's simmering, kill the heat and start melting or dotting in cold butter until it thickens up and is emulsified. But like I said, we're using the bottle today, which I had no problem with. Now another key ingredient is lettuce. Now they'd serve the sandwich with lettuce and tomato, but I find tomato to be just a little too overpowering of a flavor, too juicy. I don't love the texture in it, and I always took it out of the sandwich whenever they put it in. So I'm not gonna add it, but I did enjoy lettuce. There's something magical that happens when you mix buffalo hot sauce with like an iceberg lettuce. It's really good. And so what I'm gonna do is, it's a little something different than what they did, is I'm gonna take my iceberg and I'm gonna shred it. I just cut off a little piece. I'm gonna go through and just start to finely slice it into a nice shred. You just wanna slice it as thin as you can, get it into a bowl, and then let it chill in the fridge. So now, our chicken has been marinating in the buttermilk, but I don't want to just take it from the buttermilk and start to bread it. I don't want there to be a ton of moisture on the chicken before I start to bread it. That might interfere with how that breading adheres. So to get a good coating of that breading, since we're going to be using the traditional 3-stage breading station, I'm going to take them out of the buttermilk and I'm going to try and wring out all that moisture and then place them on a sheet tray with a paper towel to allow them to dry. Once all the chicken is in the sheet tray, place another sheet of paper towel on top and allow that towel to wick away as much moisture as you can while we set up our breading station. While the chicken dries, we're going to set up a 3-stage breading station with my super secret chicken finger breading. First bowl, flour. Maybe a cup to 2 cups, whatever you want. Next up, I need 2 eggs. Hit them both with salt. And then you just want to beat the egg until the egg white's completely worked into the egg yolk and there's no stringy bits. So it's going to coat the chicken really well. Now for our super secret crispy crunchy topping, I'm going to go with about 3/4 of a cup of seasoned Italian breadcrumbs. Then I'm going to go equal parts panko, and then the real kicker is some cornflakes. Again, all these measurements are loose. You could probably just be safe with a cup of each, but I'm gonna go with maybe 4 handfuls of the cornflakes, get them into a Ziploc bag, and then I'm gonna squeeze and crunch them with my hand, almost like a preliminary breakup before I process them even further. All said and done, I'm gonna need about a cup to a cup and a half of these, just because I want the flavor of the cornflake to come through. Then using a rolling pin, continue to process the cornflakes into smaller pieces that are closer in size to the panko. Then get it into the rest of the breading. The cornflake is gonna add a great corn flavor and great crunch. And I get those all worked in. Then we wanna season that with 1 teaspoon of garlic powder, 1 teaspoon of onion powder, 1 teaspoon of Italian seasoning, 1 teaspoon of paprika, 1 teaspoon of cayenne, a few pinches of salt, and some fresh cracked black pepper. And mix it all together until it's really well combined. There you're gonna have a really nice breading for chicken fingers. Now snuggle those bowls together nice and close, and we can start to dredge a batch of chicken in the flour. Get them well coated on all sides and then dust off the excess and then transfer them into the egg, and the same thing with the egg. Get them really well coated. Then I'm just gonna go ahead and load up the rest of the chicken in that flour. Once the chicken is fully coated in the egg, drain off any excess and then get a few of them into the breading. Ultimately, the breading will make or break this chicken, so as I always say, make sure you show this chicken some love. Gently press that breading in, flip it constantly, sprinkling the breading on top, making sure every inch is coated and there is a nice blend of the coarse breadcrumbs and the fine breadcrumbs on each piece of chicken, all which have a purpose. The coarse breadcrumbs add an intense crunch, the cornflakes add great crunch and flavor, and the fine breadcrumbs fill in the gaps to create almost like this impenetrable shell of a breading. So once you're sure they're all perfectly breaded, get them onto a plate and work your way through the rest of the chicken. Once all the chicken is breaded, we're ready to fry them. Bring them over to the stove, and in a large pot or a Dutch oven, add enough neutral frying oil to come up just below halfway on the pot. I have some recycled fry oil here. I'm gonna add that, and then I'm just gonna top it off with a little bit of fresh oil. Let it cool, strain it out, pour it back into the container, and you can use it about 3 or 4 more times. Let the oil come up to a frying temperature of about 350 to 360 degrees Fahrenheit, and once that oil is hot, start to transfer in about 4 chicken fingers at a time into the oil and start immediately monitoring the temp to see if the oil drops significantly. It seems to be holding nice and steady. These are going to cook for about 2 to 3 minutes. Any more than that will dry them out. So you want to make sure your oil stays nice and hot. During those few minutes, just keep them moving, flip them a few times, and just make sure that they're browning evenly on all sides. And once you achieve a beautiful deep golden brown like this, remove them from the oil, let them drain on a wire rack, and lightly season with salt. Add another batch of chicken and repeat until all the chicken is perfectly cooked and perfectly brown. Now this recipe isn't just for buffalo chicken. Anytime you need a perfect chicken tender, whether it's for kids or for the kid inside of you, these are gonna hit really, really hard. Once they're all fried up, we can let those hang out, move the oil off to the side, and then I'm gonna take a flat top griddle, just because I have it close by. I'm gonna put it on the stove and I'm gonna bring that up to temperature. This is just gonna be up to toast up the Kaiser rolls. Now let's take a good look at our chicken. That thing is crusted in there. Crispy, crunchy, perfect. Now while that heats up, please afford me a minute to explain myself. You see, if you grew up in Westchester, you likely knew and loved a place called the Candlelight Inn in Scarsdale, New York. Imagine a dive bar, cash only, with a menu built around excellent buffalo wings and open till about 3 in the morning. Whether it was your birthday, a win after a big game, or late night drunk eats, Candlelight was the place. And one of the highlights on that menu was a buffalo chicken sandwich. Made with chicken fingers, soaked in buffalo sauce on a Kaiser roll with blue cheese dressing, lettuce, and tomato. It's hard to describe how obsessed I was with this sandwich growing up. But after life took over in my mid-30s, I realized it had been a while since I had tried that sandwich I once loved. So during COVID, I found myself in the area, so I decided to give him a call to pick up a sandwich. Hello, Candlelight Inn, how can I help you? Yes, hi, can I have a buffalo chicken sandwich, please, for pickup? She explained, I'm sorry, sweetie, we don't have that right now. So I said, what does that mean? And then she explained, well, the frozen chicken manufacturer is shut down, so we don't serve it right now. I was a bit taken aback, sort of speechless. This statement to me was utterly insane. So many thoughts were floating through my head in the moment, but just one thing I wanted to scream into the phone was, you can't make chicken fingers? It was so disappointing, and then recently I tried it again with their new chicken fingers and whatever new thing that they're doing with it now. It's absolute trash. It really is a tragedy. So that's why we're not fucking around with chicken fingers. We made the greatest chicken fingers you're ever gonna have, because that's what's gonna make or break your buffalo chicken sandwich. Now all that's left to do is toast the Kaiser roll. And the Kaiser roll is really essential. It's got the right texture, it's got chew, but it's also fluffy. You can try other breads, but I have. Nothing tastes quite as nostalgic as one of these rolls. Now the griddle is hot. We're going to place the roll cut side down onto the griddle and get it toasted. Then I'm just going to heat up a little bit of the buffalo sauce. Now we just want to toast the inside of the roll until it reaches a nice golden brown evenly around the roll. Then remove it off the griddle and bring the hot sauce over to the cutting board so we can assemble the sandwich. In a bowl, add about 3 chicken fingers. Add enough buffalo sauce to fully coat each chicken tender and then toss to get them glazed with the buffalo sauce. On the bottom half of the roll, nestle the chicken so that they fit nicely onto the toasted roll. Now at Candlelight, if you asked for it wet, they'd pour extra hot sauce. So I'm just gonna add some more sauce that's in the bowl right on top. On top of that, a nice dollop of the blue cheese dressing, and then finally a nice big handful of the shredded lettuce. Close it up, cut it in half, and guys, I think we got a winner. This chicken is super moist from the buttermilk and incredibly tender. The breading is still crunchy and also has great flavor. The crunch from the toasted roll comes through. The blue cheese cools down that slight heat from the sauce, and it blends with that crunchy lettuce to create some magical alchemy that brings the whole thing home. And when we compare it to the Candlelight sandwich, it's a no comparison. Their chicken looks like shit, the lettuce looks dead, but it's all good. In life, things change, and now I make buffalo chicken sandwiches at home. I think I could eat it every day. So if you happen to be from a place in the country or the world that never got to enjoy buffalo chicken sandwich, give this a shot. You may never be the same again. Recipe's gonna be down in the description. That's all that I have today. I'll see you next time. Until then, take care of yourself and go feed yourself.